Hey everybody.
Hi everyone.
It is October.
October in 2024 and we are in the wild woods of
Georgia.
Georgia.
Yes, we are in the wilderness. And we are talking this month and thinking this month about how every single one of us is wilderness.
Wilderness is such an interesting word. Wilderness, bewildered, wild. It goes back to, as far back as we can see, to a notion of something that's uncultivated and opening itself naturally. And I think we still hold that definition largely today.
Yeah, it's really quite something to consider. And from the very beginning of the time that we knew each other, and that has been about 11 3/4 years, but who's counting? Um, we have been noting that each of us is wilderness to the other, and not just that, we're wilderness to ourselves. So we're offering that as something for all of us to consider together.
Yeah, wilderness in this sense, I think we're talking about a level of complexity and relationships and exchanges of energy that's so really complicated and deep that we just can't quite ever get our heads around it to grok it. And that's exciting. That's the place from which a lot of creativity happens, a lot of surprises, a lot of enchantment. What was it Rumi said? Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment.
Yes.
And that's kind of the spirit that we're offering this in.
Yes. And so, yeah, I really think you're right that the mind can't, and you said grok, we just can't wrap our heads around this. We can't, our minds, I mean, look at science. Everything that we know not 100%. But it looks like this is how it's going. And that's very cool because science is a great storytelling system that uses pretty significant rigor to check out its ideas. And so science is really good about that, but the mind can't accomplish the entire, or can't overcome the entire challenge of understanding completely. But guess what can? The heart. The heart gets it, and it doesn't need to put words on it. And it is connected, and it is present, and it is not at all intimidated by all of us being wilderness. It's not a problem. It doesn't matter that we don't know everything. What matters is that we're right here, and that we're paying attention, and that we are kind of, see what you think about this, humbly engaged, so that we don't have to be know-it-alls. We don't have to know everything, but we do pay attention to what's going on around us to be in concert with that, because we survive because we're connected.
And I think science can either be practiced with that humility, and Einstein was probably a good example of somebody who practiced it that way, but it can also be practiced with an enormous amount of hubris and arrogance. And I'm writing this book on the Ponderosa forests of the Southwest right now, as some of you know. And the Forest Service, the early forest researchers of the 20th century thought, hey, any fire is bad because fire burns trees, and that means we can't use that tree for lumber and timber and make money off of it, and that's what we're all about. Well, lo and behold, science later discovers that in the interior West, the trees, the forests have evolved to absolutely have to have fire. And without the fire, it's a complete disaster, and it's what, to a large extent, we're seeing, especially goosed by climate change, now going on in the forests of the West. So that humility idea is so important to how we go through life and how we practice our arts and our sciences.
Well, and the other thing that we've done in the human sciences and the social sciences is to take hold of these developmental theories and think, okay, we've got it. We know how it is that people develop and who they are at different ages and stages and kind of what's going on. Oh, no, we don't. We are learning so much from neurobiology, for one thing, but also just watching each other. Kids have so much wisdom. Now, we know that because we get awed by these little Buddhas and what we call old souls, children who are old, but everybody is. And there is a kind of measure of elderhood, I would suggest, in everybody, and we've talked about this a lot, that we've got that accessible to us our whole lives. But here's the other thing. When we are adults, say of childbearing age, and whatever that means, and we have children, we think we remember what it was like, and we kind of do, but then our children just start baffling us because we don't remember it as well. From our standpoint and our memory, it's not what these kids are doing. So we have to learn from the wilderness that they are, and be open to that. And then any next age that you come to, whether you're a younger person or you've got quite a few years, it's wilderness. You're stepping into something that other people have done, but you've never been there before, and you really don't, and it's different because it's you moving through it. And so we've been also thinking about how you see elderhood, you see aging move through wild nature, and how we, especially in our age right now, are finding that what we step into next, it's a wilderness to us. It's always unknown what we're stepping into. And so what does that mean in terms of how we best get along with one another in larger human society and in this obvious society of all being?
And that may be part of the secret to releasing the power of the wilderness, is to release the need to have one right answer, to have one truth, unchangeable, to discover, as Descartes swore there was, and Francis Bacon swore there was, these ultimate truths that would, absolutely explain everything in the universe and ultimately allow us to control and possess nature, as Descartes said. If we can keep a relationship to the wilderness that honors the fact that we don't know what's going on, but yet we can assume that it contains a great many of the answers that we need. It's just that those answers may shift over time, they may be highly more complex than we think, and they're probably based in some expression of relationship rather than some individual component of the relationship of the wilderness. It's not rugged individualism, as you've heard us say before, is a complete fantasy. There's no such thing anywhere on planet Earth as a rugged individual.
And then also reaching into our intellectual past and reaching into spiritual traditions rather than intellectual traditions. There was a sage back early in the 19th century, lived until 51, named Ramana Maharshi. And one of the things that he said was, you must watch for how it is that people try to hold the truth still. And we've had these conversations about how there's really nothing wrong with religion and traditions of spirituality until they become formulaic. And once you apply a formula and say, this is the way it has to be, or this is what goodness always looks like, or so on and so forth, this is the way life unfolds in the wisdom tradition, you've pretty much taken the life out of it. Because you can't hold any of this mystery, this wilderness, you can't hold it still and have it continue and continue to be attentive to the living truth. And so we are thinking about the living truth in human relationships, the living truth in our very own lives. What is that? And how do we let ourselves live from that? It takes a lot of putting down socialization and conditioning, a lot of it. And that may be the exercise of these human lives, and we never get 100% there.
Well, I've heard you make the point before, when you come up with if you want to talk about a list of, how to reach, let's say, enlightenment or get to heaven, let's say the 10 Commandments. One way to look at it is, okay, these were handed down to us and these are the rules that we need to follow. And if we do, it's a transactional situation. We'll get to heaven. You can also look at it, those 10 Commandments really were based on people looking around and saying, well, the people who seem to be doing the best and are most related and relatable and are having the most success in life happen to live in these ways. And that's a very different look at a set of rules, whether they're guidelines or whether they're absolutely unchanging forever maxims that you have to follow with the threat of hell behind them. Those are two very different ways to look at the situation.
Yes. And so this is another way of considering the wilderness that we are, and how when you watch what comes forward from your truest expression, that may line up with the precepts of Buddhism. But to take the precepts of Buddhism as the instructions that you must, that's what you're saying, that you must follow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are here in this wilderness talking with you about wilderness and inviting you to consider, what do you think? Don't believe us. Are we wilderness? Are you wilderness? Or do you have yourself all pretty much figured out? Are the people in your lives that you're closest to, are they wilderness? Or do you have them pretty much figured out? I mean, for us, it just takes looking for a moment at the people in our lives and at each other. And we're like, ooh, no, I don't. And myself, I don't have myself figured out. No.
You don't?
No, I
Wow.
don't. No.
Oh, gee.
No. And it's a pretty, it is at the bottom when I drop all of my anxious socialization, my separation beliefs, my beliefs that I'm separate from anything else, then it becomes clearer that I don't know, and I'm this unfolding phenomenon, just like I'm looking at this tree trunk across from us that is filled with evidence of woodpeckers.
Hundreds and hundreds of
Therefore,
holes.
it's filled with evidence of bugs that the woodpeckers have fed off of.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah?
Yep, they're
And
not
it's
just drilling that for their health.
A
That's
healthy,
true.
healthy old tree, because all three of them interact with each other in ways that make it all work in the ecosystem.
You know, one last thing I wanted to bring up, and we can talk about this more during the deep dive, and that's the notion of wilderness as it applies to, say, land management. You know, we came up in 1964 with the Wilderness Act, a place where humans do not reside permanently, they're only visitors. And given our history in Western culture, especially for the last 500 years, that sort of makes sense. You know, that wilderness is out there, free of being sullied by the human experience, and free of being exploited for what it can be traded for, what transactions can be exchanged for money, basically. You know, that makes sense to have had those protected areas, and I'm very grateful we do. But many of Mary's Native American friends are very confused about the whole idea, because there is not a place where humans have not been, where they have not interacted with. And certainly that's true across this entire continent. All the thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of native people were interacting with their environment. Just the use of fire was widespread from East Coast to West Coast in order to accomplish certain things in the relationship humans had with the natural world. So to see wilderness as not just exclusive outside of humans, but also to contain humans as part of the dance that's going on this planet, I think that's a challenge, but it's time that we maybe look into that.
Yeah, as we often say, consider this. We would suggest that we are nature in nature, behaving as nature. So what does that mean? And when we do these things that are, we could say, misinformed, that we are separate from the natural world and need to dominate or extract from or be very, very afraid of the natural world and of each other. You know, is that really serving us? And so it's important to look at what is laid into culture. Is it like as Gary was suggesting, into indigenous culture, you find that there is more of a deep understanding and an abiding understanding that we are the natural world, that all humans are in fact the natural world in full relationship with everything else in the natural world. But in dominant European culture, that's not been the case for thousands of years.
And it's a profoundly sad disconnect. We decided that we were on top of the heap. Humans were superior, vastly superior to nature, which, by the way, that's the way, when you think of a group that's been oppressed, whether it's people of color or women or certain religious sects, you hear them historically compared to being closer to nature. And that was an insult. It means that they were not as smart, not as rational, not as able to be successful on this planet as you know they could be, as other groups of people. So that's sort of creating a tier of who's best and who's least and who's smartest and who's lacking the most in intelligence, that is yet another kind of separation that really cuts us off from those other people. And it's certainly, if you hold that against nature, that it's just dumb nature that we deserve to have dominion over, then you cut yourself off from not only the gifts that it can teach you, but also from the kinship and the deep sense of belonging that it offers if you embrace it.
And in a fascinating way, you check this for yourself. The people who have been most marginal to that sense, that dumb nature that you were just describing, have less trouble with wilderness. So people who have been marginalized have less trouble with not knowing, with not having 100% understanding of what's going on in the unfolding of wilderness. Check that for yourself, because that's a big generalization, and it's not, I'm sure, 100% true, because when trauma considerations come in there, and a lot of people who have been at the margins are pretty drawn to taking on the methods of the oppressor. So that's another thing to look at. However, one way of thinking about it is that love is going to have its way. And if you understand love as the kind of flawless logic of wilderness unfolding to itself, then, all this mess that we've been in for these thousands of years of separation thinking, it just can't sustain itself. So we're going to be thinking about this month.
I like what you just said. And wilderness as love could be understood as nature as always being about sustaining the biggest diversity of species, creating the most vibrant life possible. And that's a kind of love. And that really is the way of the world. And that doesn't mean we followed that particular truth, but that's what's out there for us, and that's what's in here for us.
And that is definitely wilderness.
Yes.
So here we are in the woods of Georgia, and happy to be talking with you and introducing this idea. We hope you'll join us in the deep dive, which will be, we think, the 9th, it's the second Tuesday of the month. And our math is saying, although we haven't looked at the calendar, that that's the 9th of October. We will be sending out a newsletter announcement to remind you of that, but it's at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. And we look forward to seeing you then to talk about this more. We guarantee that there will not be a presidential debate.
Yes,
I mean, as best we can. We think there will not be a presidential debate at that time. So we do look forward to seeing you.
And write us anytime you want at connect@fullecology.com. And we do hope to see you during the deep dive to talk about all this with you. It's an exciting topic. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and if you haven't yet, go and sign up for the newsletter at the bottom of the homepage, which is www.fullecology.com, and check out the podcast we've been doing. We just have entered our 5th year, unbelievable, called How It Looks From Here, Life in the Time of Climate Change.
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, it's there.
Yeah. And you can hear Gary's musical talents.
Oh, boy.
Really. Go check it out. See if you can find it. Yeah, they're really good. And he did a good job. He does the theme music. All right.
Generous.
Yeah, well, you're good at it.
Thanks,
okay.
everyone.
Watch your wilderness. We'll talk with you soon.
Bye for now.
Happy October. Bye.